Oh, hi. Hello, everybody. I was just catching up with the latest manga. And since this week there is no One Piece chapter, I wanted to make this video talking about Monkey D. Dragon, the Revolutionary. More specifically, though, I want to be able to power scale Dragon accurately. Now, I know you may be asking yourself, how do you power scale a character surrounded by so much mystery and secrecy, right? Because there's not a whole lot of feats that we can go on to power scale Dragon. However, as you will soon find out, I've been giving this a lot of thought, and so the best answer that I could come up with is that in order to power scale a mysterious, secretive character like Dragon the Revolutionary, the best way to do that right now is by looking at the hierarchy that he works in. So in Dragon's case, that would mean that you look at characters within the Revolutionary Army, you scale those characters within the hierarchy of the army, and work your way up. Now for this video, I'm going to have to exclude the members that were newly introduced in Reverie. I'm not going to be talking about Karasu, Lindbergh, Bello Betty, or Morley, and I'm not going to be talking about them because we really don't know much about them. Like, there's very little information. There's just like a lack of data when it comes to those four characters. So instead, I'm going to be talking about the characters that we do have information about that either belong or belonged to the Revolutionary Army, that worked under Dragon, that were subordinates to Dragon, and that we have more information on. So I'm going to start talking about them, and then I'm going to be working my way up to Dragon.
All right, so let's start with Ivankov, right? So back in Marineford, if you remember, Ivankov decides to stay behind and mess with Akainu in order to allow Jinbei the opportunity to escape with Luffy. However, Akainu quickly manages to deal with Ivankov by punching him in the face. And so Ivankov is pretty much done after that. And one of the things that I've said, and I still maintain, is that one of the traits, power-wise, of a first Yonko commander is that a first Yonko commander should be able to either push back or stall an admiral temporarily without getting defeated quickly, okay? So I'll say this again. A first Yonko commander should be able to push back or stall an admiral without getting defeated quickly. And there's evidence for this, right? We see this with Ben Beckman being able to stall Kizaru. We see it with Marco being able to push back Kizaru as well. And we see it with Marco against Akainu. If you remember, we see Marco temporarily stalling Akainu after Akainu kills Ace because Marco wants to protect Luffy. And so we see Marco being able to hold off Akainu temporarily without Marco getting defeated quickly. And so this is important, and I'm going to come back to it, so just remember that, okay? Another way of scaling Ivankov is by going back to Impel Down and looking at what level Ivankov was sent to. If you remember, before going into level 5.5, right, Ivankov was originally sent to level 5. The freezing level. And so we know that that level held prisoners with bounties that were 100 million and above, right? And so that gives us a minimum for Ivankov's bounty. It essentially means that Ivankov's bounty has to be at least 100 mil, right? Now, the fact that Ivankov was sent to level 5 originally, that's where he was placed, is important because we know that if we go down a level, if we go down to level 6, most, if not all of the evidence points to the notion that all of the characters, the prisoners being held at level 6, are at least Yonko Commander level. Okay? So the characters at level 6 have to be Yonko Commander level at minimum. Okay? Because we have characters like Ace, and Ace was the 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, and was able to fight on par with Jinbei, and Jinbei was also being held at level 6, so those characters are at least 2nd Yonko Commander level. You also have characters like Shiryu there in level 6, and I think a lot of people would argue, or would make the argument, that Shiryu is 1st Yonko Commander level.
We also know that Doflamingo ended up in level 6 as well after his fight with Luffy in Dressrosa. Then after fighting Dofi, Luffy went on to fight Cracker, and it became apparent that Doflamingo and Cracker were around the same level, and since Cracker is 3rd Yonko Commander, you can make an approximation and pretty much say, with a lot of confidence actually, that Doflamingo is also around 3rd Yonko Commander level. So he went to level 6. A lot of Blackbeard's newest crew members also come from level 6, and we don't have a lot of feats or information about them. But you can speculate, given the fact that Blackbeard is sort of like an end of the series villain. The only one that's, a little bit iffy would be Crocodile, because he was defeated relatively early on in the series by Luffy. However, you can make the argument that even though he was defeated relatively early on, it took Luffy 3 attempts to be able to take him down. So I think a lot of fans kind of give Crocodile some leeway because of that. Because if you have to go up against a guy 3 times to take them down, then that says something about that guy and how strong he is.
That being said, though, the fact still stands that Ivankov was sent to level 5. So the question still remains. If Ivankov was Yonko Commander level, why was he sent to level 5 instead of being sent to level 6?
Does Ivankov being sent to level 5 instead of being sent to level 6 automatically mean that Ivankov isn't Yonko Commander level? No, not necessarily. I mean, because you can technically argue that since the Revolutionary Army is so secretive, that maybe the Marines didn't have enough information on Ivankov to properly assess how dangerous and powerful he was. So they just decided to go with level 5. However, I think the biggest point detractor when it comes to Ivankov's level actually comes from his student, from looking at Sanji and his growth. So right now in the series, given everything that we've seen thus far, I think it's pretty clear, and I think it's a pretty fair assessment to say that Sanji's goal, power-wise, right now, should be to aim to be around second Yonko Commander level. I think that's fair to say that should be his aim. However, post-time skip, and before Sanji got his raid suit, I think there were moments, there were opportunities for Sanji to show whatever moves he learned from Ivankov, whatever power-ups he got from Ivankov. And thus far, I think it's very clear that Ivankov did not show Sanji, any kind of powerful combat move that was close to second Yonko Commander level. Not even close. I would say not even close to third Yonko Commander level, because we saw him struggle against Dofi. So with that in mind, I do think that kind of scales Ivankov downward in terms of where he ranks within the subordinates that Dragon has had. And that doesn't mean that I think Ivankov is weak, just that in terms of within the Revolutionary Army, let's say he's not as strong as characters like Kuma, for example.
And the reason I'm saying this is because there's feats and evidence to this, right? So if you look at Kuma's durability coupled with his Devil Fruit power, it's pretty broken stuff, right? So let's take a look at that. For starters, I think it's really well understood amongst the fandom that out of the Shichibukai that showed up at Marineford, out of this lineup right here, the top 3 are Mihawk, Kuma, and Doflamingo. So out of those 3, Mihawk would be number 1, and then there's some room for debate in terms of who you have over who, whether Dofi is over Kuma or Kuma is over Dofi. But for the most part, I think, the fandom agrees that out of the lineup, those are the top 3. This goes without saying, but I'm obviously not including Blackbeard, Jinbei, or Crocodile in this. Just the people that you see on screen. Speed-wise, Kuma's pretty impressive as well. I mean, he's shown to be able to momentarily cut into Rayleigh and Kizaru's fight to whisper a message. And then there's also a scene in Marineford where he speed blitz Ivankov, and then as the confrontation heats up, Ivankov actually attacks Kuma repeatedly, right? It's not just one time, it's more than once. And Kuma just gets back up again and again, with no signs of damage. Plus, Kuma was also able to defend the Sunny for 2 years, so 2 years of Kuma defending the Sunny elapsed, and according to Frankie, there wasn't even a scratch on the ship after those 2 years. And then after that, after Frankie arrives at the Sunny, Kuma gets up, because he's completed his mission, and he walks away. And granted, he's all messed up, but he can still walk away. And from what we saw back in Reverie, his body is still functional. Because he was being used to carry around Tenryubito. So again, Kuma's durability is tremendous. Add to that the destructive capability of his Urususu Shock, or Ursus Shock, plus his ability to withdraw pain from others and use it to inflict damage, and it becomes clear that Kuma surpasses any of the examples of destructive capacity that Ivankov has shown in the series thus far.
I'm going to be talking about Sabo next, but before I get to him, I just want to give you my honest take on Dragon's Devil Fruit. And I know a lot of you may not agree with this, but I think the evidence is very clear that Dragon has a Wind Logia Devil Fruit. I think sometimes the right answer is sometimes the obvious answer. And so I think that there's enough foreshadowing and enough hints, visible hints, not implicit but explicit evidence to show that Dragon has a wind logia.
Like, for example, according to the Library of O'Hara, Dragon's ship is called the Viento Granma, and Viento means wind in Spanish, and Granma was the name of a yacht that some Cuban revolutionaries used to sail from Mexico to Cuba to overthrow a regime. Now, the figurehead of Dragon's ship is a dragon, but I think if Dragon had a Dragon Zoan Devil Fruit, similar to Kaido and Momonosuke, I think that would be a little bit too on the nose. You know, usually Oda is more creative than that. Also, Dragon having a wind logia goes well with the theme of freedom, which is what the Revolutionaries are all about. Thematically, Dragon having a wind logia would be pretty important because if you control the wind, you can control the sails of ships, and you can also create waves. So there's the incorporation of having power over the sea, which is kind of a theme of the series. Imu, for example, if you spell Imu's name backwards, you get Umi, which means sea. Plus, like, we have so much foreshadowing about the future importance of the moon, and the moon has the power to control the tides. So it's a very symbolically important thing as well. Now, Dragon was also introduced back in Logtown, where the first logia was introduced in the series, which is Smoker. And we actually saw Dragon use a little bit of his power during that time as well. I also think Dragon being a wind logia would go very well with his implied rivalry with Akainu, fire versus air, that sort of a thing. There was also a figure that was released of him a long time ago where we see him actually riding the wind, like he's the Avatar. And then we actually saw him use his powers in the anime as well when he rescued Sabo. So yeah, it's due to all those things that as of right now, I'm sticking to Dragon being a wind logia.
And just as a brief little side note here, I also read on Library of O'Hara that Dragon's main goal is peace. And so when it comes to battles and fights, he always views battles as a means to an end, the end being peace. And that it's not something that he just engages in for fun. So he doesn't get into fights for fun. It's not something that he enjoys doing, but all those things should ultimately lead to peace. And so knowing that, I think it kind of helps to explain why it was that him and the Revolutionary Army left Baltigo when Blackbeard arrived to go get Burgess.
All right, so now we can go ahead and talk about Sabo. So if we go back to when Luffy, Ace, and Sabo were little, the anime shows us that Sabo and Ace were around the same level back then. There's a moment in the anime where Luffy, Ace, and Sabo are taking turns at each other, essentially trying to beat each other. And the result is, back then, the result is that Ace and Sabo are both superior to Luffy, but that Ace and Sabo are pretty even, right? Sabo even says that out of 50 matches against Ace, he's 124 and Ace has 126. So he's down by 2. But the point here, and the point that Luffy makes, is that they're pretty evenly matched, like even with those losses against Sabo. And this is important to keep in mind because we know that later on, Ace goes on to become the second Yonko commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, essentially. So the question is, okay, so what happens to Sabo after this? Well, after he survives the explosion, Sabo is taken by the Revolutionaries, and then he begins training under them. There's even some scenes in the anime that give us a glimpse into Sabo's training, and at one point he's pretty excited because he feels like he's ready to take on Kuma. So he tries it, and of course he fails. He can't do anything against Kuma back then. But the important thing here is that Sabo was trained under Kuma when he was a little kid. Now, one of the main feats that Sabo has going for him is a move called Dragon Breath, where he pretty much hockeys up his fists and then injects the hockey into a surface and blows it up from the inside out. We saw him use it in Dressrosa. The move is pretty much an exact replica. It's a perfect illustration of what Hyogoro was talking about in Udon when he was trying to teach Luffy an advanced form of armament hockey. Because in order to do the move, you have to take your Ryo, which is the hockey that emanates from your body, and then inject it inside something to destroy it from the inside. Now, the anime actually has a scene that shows Sabo using this move back when he was 17. Right? Now Sabo is 3 years older than Luffy. So if we take this as canon, the fact that, Sabo was using this move back when he was 17, then that means that Sabo was rocking the advanced armament hockey move 3 years before Luffy even set sail out on his adventure. Now that aside, we know that Sabo's fighting style is called Ryosuken, right? Which translates into Dragon Claw Fist, right? And because of the name, it becomes pretty obvious that the person who taught Sabo this fighting style was Dragon, right? And so if we accept that it was Dragon, the one who trained Sabo in these techniques, and because you can't really teach somebody something unless you're competent yourself in the subject that you're teaching. Like, in order to be a good teacher at something, you either have to know and be competent in the subject that you're teaching, or you have to be a master at it, right? So with that in mind, this leads us to the completely logical conclusion that Dragon must be either competent in the use of advanced armament haki or an advanced armament haki master.
There's just no way around that. Either Dragon is a competent user of advanced armament haki or he's a master at it. And if you remember, the reason for why Luffy wanted to learn the technique in the first place was because he wanted to use that advanced armament haki to be able to bypass Kaido's scales and deal some damage to him. So what does that tell us? Well, it heavily implies that the use of advanced armament haki can be used to deal damage to a Yonko.
And speaking of Yonko, we know that one of the common traits that they have or that they share is King's Haki. I mean, Blackbeard is doubtful thus far, but because we don't know if he has it or not. But we have had confirmation of Whitebeard having Conqueror's Haki. We know that Shanks has it. We know that Kaido has it, and we know that Big Mom has it as well. And what about Dragon? Well, despite the fact that we still haven't gotten official confirmation about Dragon having King's Haki, we have in fact gotten something that hints to it. There's a scene in Marineford after Luffy uses his own Conqueror's Haki to save Ace, where Vice Admiral Doberman says that he's not surprised that Luffy has King's Haki because he's the son of Dragon, the Revolutionary. So why would he say that if Dragon doesn't have King's Haki? That's a very strange thing to say, right? Like, if Dragon didn't have King's Haki, that's a very weird thing to say out loud. Also, in that very same scene, Ivankov thinks about Dragon because he associates the use of King's Haki with him. And he actually says, like, he remembers thinking, this is why people say blood will tell. Okay? So there's a reference to the blood of Dragon having something to do with Luffy having King's Haki. So those are two very subtle moments that hint towards Monkey D. Dragon having Conqueror's Haki, just like most of the Yonko.
I think the line is also a pretty good segue into genetics and how Monkey D. Dragon is the son of Monkey D. Garp, the legendary hero of the Marines, who together with Goldie Roger was able to defeat the Rocks Pirates. And of course we know that the Rocks Pirates, part of that crew was comprised of fighters, of characters that later went on to become 3 of the 4 Yonko. Now, let's go back to the point that I made in the beginning of the video, which is essentially that one of the characteristic feats of a first Yonko commander is their ability to temporarily stall or push back an admiral without getting defeated quickly, all right? With that in mind, all right, Sabo absolutely meets that requirement, because stalling an admiral without getting defeated is exactly what Sabo does back in Dressrosa against Fujitora. In fact, not only does he not get defeated quickly, but he also goes on to wreck Burgess after that as well. So if you consider this feat, the fact that he was able to stall Fujitora, right, the fact that he went on to wreck Burgess after that, plus the fact that we know that him and Ace were pretty even, all right, at the time that they were kids, and then Ace later on went on to become second Yonko commander. And then even after Ace's death, Sabo had 2 years to train up and get even stronger. Plus, I almost forgot about this, but Sabo says during his confrontation against Fujitora that he's barely getting used to the power of the Flame Fruit, right? So he's barely getting used to that Devil Fruit power, and he was still able to stall Fujitora and then take out Burgess as easily as he did. So with all of that in mind, I think it's very fair to say that Sabo is first Yonko commander level. Now, if we take that assessment to be true, all right, that Sabo is first Yonko commander level, and we apply it to the hierarchy of the Revolutionaries, it would follow, if you follow the pattern, it would follow that technically speaking, Dragon cannot be weaker than a Yonko. Because if the guy who's working under you is first Yonko commander level, then what does that make you? So yeah, if you follow that logic, I think you arrive at a pretty fair conclusion that Dragon cannot be below Yonko level. Now, is he stronger than a Yonko? Oh, so at minimum, we can say that Dragon is as strong as a Yonko, right? Not the four Yonko, because then no, that doesn't make sense. But he's at least as strong as a Yonko. Is he stronger than a Yonko? Well, this is where you kind of have to look at the story and how the events will unfold before the end of the series. So if you look at where we are right now, we know that we're in a place called the Yonko Saga, right? And that it seems like the story seems to point to the Yonko falling during the Yonko Saga. In my opinion, and Oda may change this, but I think the order is Kaido, Big Mom, Shanks, and Blackbeard. And I think that Luffy's fight against Blackbeard will be the fight for the One Piece. And then after they find the One Piece, after Luffy gets his hands on the One Piece, according to Whitebeard's words before he died, that'll start a war against the world government. And so knowing that the Revolutionary Army's role is to put up a front against the world government, to actively fight against the world government, I think that speaks to Dragon's role coming in later, coming in after the end of the Yonko Saga. There's actually two more story elements that kind of serve to foreshadow Dragon's role coming in after the end of the Yonko Saga. The first one has to do with Usopp, actually Usopp and Yasopp, because we know that there has to be a reunion between Usopp and Yasopp, father and son. We know that Yasopp is part of the Red Hair Pirates. So if you look at that construct, right, that needs to happen within the Yonko Saga at some point, because Shanks is a Yonko. So with that reunion of Usopp and Yasopp, usually what happens is that Oda loves Luffy. He loves to make Luffy shine. He wants to make Luffy number one in the eye of the reader. It's why whenever there's a pretty cool Zoro feat, Oda gives Luffy a feat that surpasses the Zoro feat of the arc. And so I think that, with that in mind, I think that the reunion between Usopp and Yasopp is going to be epic, and it's going to be super emotional. And I think Oda is going to want to outdo that with the reunion between Luffy and Dragon. So I think that's going to happen after, Usopp and Yasopp reunite. And then another thing is the fact that ever since Marineford, we know that Akainu is obsessed with Dragon. I don't know what happened. I don't know if Dragon stole his girlfriend or what, but there's clearly some animosity from Akainu against Dragon, maybe even some type of rivalry. Because in Marineford, he doesn't even call Luffy by his real name. He just keeps talking about Dragon, Dragon's son, Dragon's son. Oh, you Dragon's son. So he's clearly upset. And since we know that Akainu works for the Marines, and the Marines are a branch of the world government, they're the military might of the world government, I think it's also fair to say that that's being saved for later on in the story. Now, Akainu is a fleet admiral, right? And even though there's some debate in terms of who's stronger, an admiral or a Yonko, I've actually never seen people pose the same question for who's stronger, a fleet admiral or a Yonko. And so Fleet Admiral Akainu, or Fleet Admiral Sakazuki, right, because of his rank and because of his rivalry with Dragon, Akainu wouldn't have a rivalry with somebody who's below him.
So if you consider all of that, plus the fact that Dragon's speech back in Great Terminal has some foreshadowing to it in terms of what Imu is ultimately doing and ultimately wants to do, which is to erase people that are an inconvenience for the world government. If you take that and you also think about how Dragon is supposed to be the most wanted man in the world, or the world's worst criminal, if you take all of that stuff into consideration, story-wise, the hype does seem to suggest that Dragon could be stronger than a Yonko. Because think about this, right? We're in the finale, right? We're in the final arc, and then Dragon shows up, and the Marines are like, oh, it's the most wanted man in the world. Yeah, that's hype, man, that's hype. Is he stronger than the Yonko that have already been defeated? No, not really. Oh, Okay. Well, that's kind of disappointing. So I feel like a lot of that hype would just go down the drain if that were to happen. Now, what I foresee happening in the future is that since Kaido is not going to be defeated from a 1v1, I don't think Luffy's going to, defeat Kaido on a 1v1. I think that's ridiculous. And since Kaido has been dubbed as the strongest creature, I think what's going to happen is that Kaido is going to be taken down by the Supernova Alliance. So people are going to be ganging up on Kaido, and he's going to be defeated. And then ultimately, when Dragon actually shows up and shows his stuff, people are going to be debating hardcore. Who is actually stronger, Dragon or Kaido?
However, that's just my evaluation based on the facts and evidence that I was able to gather. It's okay if you disagree. Let me know down in the comments section what you think about Dragon. Is he Yonko level? Is he above or below it? All those thoughts are good. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I was actually really excited to make this one because as you do the research, you start seeing the pieces kind of fit together, and it's a cool discovery. So please, if you appreciated this kind of video, like it if you did, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already for more One Piece content. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you guys later. Take care, stay safe, bye.